Hello, everyone, and we are for our third session on the Pivot Sessions. We're super excited this week to have Gemma with us, and we'll be talking through changes of life pivots as well as product pivots. So I'm super excited. And just as sort of an introduction, why are we here and why are we talking about pivots? We often see, and often conversations around with founders is often that, is it a negative, didn't we get it right? And that completely isn't right. It isn't a negative, it's actually an imperative to success. And when we looked at the research around it, we saw that 75% of founders actually found that pivoting was the source of their success and was really required. And actually, if you focus on the problem you're trying to solve, then pivoting really becomes part of your everyday activity of how do you solve that problem best. And so I'm going to hand you over to Gemma to talk through why we're here and stories so far, because it's super interesting. And we'll start with, your career journey and how you got to being the founder of Gutsy Health.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. I'm Gemma Stuart. I'm the founder of Gutsy Health Limited, and we make Gut Wealth liquid supplements, which is a supplement for people with digestive health issues. It improves bloating, inflammation, and bowel regularity. So there's a bit of a taboo around these topics, and so we lean right into that and make sure that people understand that we all have to do it. I think what we're going to do is talk a little bit about like my career history and talk about my first pivot really. So prior to doing this, prior to owning my own business, I had a consultancy business where I supported corporate businesses during periods of change. So investment, divestment, technology change, product change, and often I'd be working in internal comms or employee engagement to support people through and work leadership so that colleagues understood what was happening. So I do have a background in being able to communicate in theory and sometimes about making complex things easier for people to understand. And while I was doing that, I earned good money. I enjoyed what I was doing for the most part, and I like making complex things easier to understand. But I think during the pandemic, I think we all had a lot of time in our hands to really think about how we wanted to spend the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years or so on. And for me especially, I felt like the levels of stress at times just weren't really conducive of how I wanted to live my life healthier. And it also had an impact on my own IBS. So IBS can flare up if you're stressed out. So I wasn't necessarily in the best health situation. And so had really been looking to study IBS and had gone to the University of Michigan because that all became available to us because all that content wouldn't have been around pre-pandemic, but the world opened up to us in lots of ways at the same time while our little worlds became a lot more closed. So during that period of time, I was just wanting to understand better for myself how to manage my own condition. And then that led me on to really driving and understanding more about biotics, which are essentially the beneficial bacteria that help improve your digestive health. And it led me on this journey, which doesn't make sense unless you look backwards. There was lots of how you would describe it as like the dots. The dots didn't necessarily seem like they were going to be connecting, but they connected to me and really helped me find my purpose, being able to help others. So that's been my first real pivot, if you want to describe it as that, is really changing my role, my purpose, and how I want to spend my working life.
And how did you? And that's obviously quite a big change to go from almost guaranteed income, knowing that you're confident in something that you've been doing for years, and really starting out and retraining. What sort of questions did you ask yourself before you took the plunge and made that change?
So it cut out a little bit while you were speaking there, but I think what you were asking me was like what inspired to make the change, like to go from, you were right in saying that there was a lot of stability. I had a pension being paid for me. There was structure to my life. So there was a finance team, there was marketing, there was HR, there was all these different teams that of people I would be working with. But I think what also came with that was like a lot of stress, and probably at times working in teams where I didn't feel like we were working as a team, and that didn't really sit very well with me. And at times I wouldn't behave as a good team member. So those things weren't really sitting well with me. But also I think there was a couple of periods of time where I was being asked to do things by senior leaders that just didn't sit well with my models. And so I think when you're in the, when you're in the know on these big projects, and you've got a non-disclosure agreement and you're working behind the scenes, but ultimately you're making changes to people's lives. The thing that I used to get a lot of felt good about doing that was that I know that I would be supporting people to be able to understand the change better, whereas actually some of the changes that I was starting to be asked to work on just didn't fit well with me. So I suppose there was lots of things going on around this time with the pivot. It wasn't just one thing. I think it wasn't even like a straw that broke the camel's back. I just had this feeling and urge that I needed to do something when I started to understand more about product development, about biotics, especially postbiotics, which eventually then went into the product that I made. But also there was a few other things that were going on around the same time. A friend of mine, Natasha Whiting, who I look up to in lots of different ways, we've been friends for, I think, since 2007, 2008, just around the time when Facebook became a thing. I met her in a bar in Bangkok, and I've seen her in the last few years develop her business in the vitamin supplement space. And it wasn't that I thought what she'd done looked easy in any way. That definitely wasn't the case. I could hear warts and all about what was going on in the background of building this business. But I think you can kind of see yourself when you see others do to make change. And I saw the pride that she had in what she was doing. And while her business is very, very different to mine, I definitely saw some inspiration from that. I also, there was lots of reasons why I wasn't wanting to do what I was currently doing, but there was lots of reasons that were driving me to want to help others. I think as well, during that time, I was starting to engage. I'm not really an online chat kind of person, but I was starting to engage with other people, trying to find out how they were solving and improving their digestive health. There was lots going on around, this is pre-Zoe as it is now, but Zoe existed. At the time, what they were asking people to do was track their COVID symptoms. There was a lot of things going on where we were all starting to really think about taking responsibility for our own health. And I felt that from the research that I was doing, as well as the studying, as well as all the others, is it was pivoting and driving me. But it wasn't like someone else was turning the car for me. It was like I just knew where the end goal was and I had to get there. So there was a lot of things going on, all at the same time. And I would love to hear if any entrepreneurs just one day woke up, it was a thing, but for me it was like lots and lots and lots of stuff that were all piecing together, or dots that were all connected together, that really started to drive what I'm doing now.
And what surprised you during this journey? What did you not realise would happen, or anything that you were shocked about as you were going through this change from being a consultant into developing Gutsy Health?
So Lucy, I'm really struggling when you're speaking there. I just not able to pick up what you're saying. Do you mind just popping it in the chat, or if there's another way of communicating with it? I'm just not getting the words that you're asking. I suppose the problem at times, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I think the internet's not great, but we can hear you, so that's all good.
Still not quite there. What surprised me about the journey? Things have surprised me about the journey. I think some of the things that I really focused my attention in this start, on top of those things, but others. So for example, like the product development, I'd never developed a product before, so I was working with industry experts. I had I call them science nerds, which is not very nice, but it's meant in a better way. The science nerds were helping me. And I think so. The surprises around that felt easier, but it's because we were on all support. Whereas other things, like I thought that launching the website and getting the product on there was going to be the bit that people would just be flocking in their millions to come and buy the product. I mean, obviously I knew that wasn't necessarily going to be the case, but I definitely think that some of the surprising bits that were harder was just like to start a brand from zero, and then for people to put their faith in a product that they didn't know me, they didn't know my background. You know, you're having to, it's not surprising, but I think it was definitely harder. In terms of other things that were surprising, I think just how challenging some of the stuff in the background is. Like, all you see as a consumer is that there's a nice shiny website there and you can click on the thing and you buy the thing and it arrives. There's a lot more to it than that, which I knew as I was building the product, but I think I'm building the business. I think the surprising bit comes from of just like one little thing that can go wrong, and it just sort of like can create such chaos around your whole network of what you're trying to achieve. Yeah, I think that's probably the bit that's surprising me the most.
And what helped to keep you going during those sort of challenging moments? Because that part where you're trying something new and you haven't done the product before, you're gaining that confidence and asking for favors as you have to as a founder in those early days. What helped to keep you going?
Yeah, so the bits that I've just described definitely weren't my most challenging bits. The most challenging bit for me was around a year ago. So it was last January, February, and my fulfillment company sent an email essentially saying, like, you've got to get out, like we're not making enough money off you, essentially. And I can pay to use them as storage, but not, it was very clear they didn't want to keep working with me. And they essentially said, like, get out now, get your product out now. It was said slightly nicer than that, but that's what happened. And at that point in time, I was just about to start a big marketing campaign and then pulled it and panicked. Like, that's essentially what happened, is because I didn't know where my product was going to go. So effectively, it took me 4 weeks to find another fulfillment company, and that all worked really well. For like the next 6 months, I worked with another fulfillment company that were great for that period of time in my business. But during that time, I was just like on high alert. I cried quite a few times. I think I cried every day for 2 weeks to my parents, who were like sort of on the phone, and we never really have ever done video chat. But I was 39 years old crying on the phone to my parents, and they're sort of saying to me, like, okay, and they can't help because they don't really know how to solve it. They don't understand the problem. And actually the problem wasn't really that big. I think that was the problem that made me start to like really reassess certain things around, I can't have my emotions of that day be related to my business. Like, the business is going to be success or failure. It's going to be a success, but I can't let, certain actions really take over my day or my week. So it all came round and everything got sorted. I think it was just this pressure of, I'd really built up how this big marketing campaign was going to really set the scene, and it was going to build on everything for the previous 6 months, and just shelving it, and I lost some money. And so I think that was just like the most challenging moment. So in terms of how I dealt with it, crying on the phone wasn't necessarily the best way forward, but that was my release of that energy. And I think a lot of us, when I speak to other founders now, because at that point in time, I just didn't really have any like people close in my network of founders. It seemed to me that everybody was doing really well on LinkedIn, and they're all smashing these targets and selling loads of stuff and doing all these great things. And I was sat there at home going, I can't figure out what to do with my product, and I'm in a bit of a mess. So I very much relied on my like family, my friends. I did go into a little bit of a dark hole for a couple of weeks of just like not really sure what I was doing and feeling a bit panicked and stuff. But what I've really learned since then is I've now built a much stronger network of other founders. So I'm in a couple of accelerator programs. I've got a network of people that I rely on, and we all privately and quietly say to each other, like, oh, hey, how's your week going? And one of them's having a rubbish week and one of us having a good week. And somebody, we're all like 6 months ahead of each other, or they've done something that I've not done. And so we learn from each other. And that's really like the best source of help, because nobody wants to go on LinkedIn saying, no, I'm having a disaster of a time. But you can privately say to somebody, hey, I'm not doing so well on this thing, and just talking through with somebody with no judgment is so helpful. And hopefully, like, I'm also been helpful to other people that that when they've had a rough time. I think I am. So that's what helps me keep going, is like having a network of just a few people, that we can be honest and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly with.
Part about those networks, isn't it, that everybody has a slightly different experience and they've been through different challenges, so you can all help each other. No one person knows everything, but if you can be supportive and listen with no judgment, it can just be the absolute difference in keeping you going. And so I'd love to move on to some of your the pivots you've made in the business as well, because obviously the last couple of years of building, and nothing's going to stay the same as it has been right from the beginning. So could you tell us some of the sort of big aha moments that you've that have made you change the way you're delivering?
Yeah, so I'll probably lump I was going to talk about two separate pivots, but I'll probably lump them all in together, to be honest. So the first one is the pack size. So I'm going to tell you what I thought was the right thing to do. I thought launching my product, it comes in a little sachet like this. I don't know if you can see. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I thought launching that in a pack size of 30 made perfect sense. So it made sense from the scientific point of view, obviously around like the build up of the product over a period of time. It worked in my mind of like budgeting point of view. So the customers would buy 30 days and, then they can buy like around their payday and that type of thing. I thought it would work for multiple reasons. 30 just made sense. It's a nice, concise number. Actually, in reality, the pack size 30, to buy a premium product on a pack size 30, having never tried the product, was a really hard sell in the first like 6 months of making the product. But also what it meant was the pack size was too big to fit in Royal Mail large letter, and so it chewed into my margins. So like every penny and pound counts, that especially in startup is like, and I think that I just made it really difficult for myself as I was trying to get people to like latch on to 30 days rather than giving them the opportunity to buy a 14-day pack, which is what we now do. And then also we then allow for the 14 pack to upsell into a 28. So there's lots of reasons why that works. It also works better for our subscriptions, and there's various things that works for. But the main sort of thing was that this wasn't just a one size problem when I made the change, it wasn't just fixing one problem. It helped my margin. It helped with us being able to upsell. It helped with us to be able to give like an easier entry point in for like new customers, but also around the pack sizes fitting in people's letter boxes. So the reason why Royal Mail have those letter size packages is that that's what's like the standard size, and I didn't realize that at the time. And so customers, when we first started, we weren't in a lockdown anymore, but we were still in a lot of like people phasing. There was still people taking masks. People were wearing masks in Scotland and England. All across the UK. But things were starting to ease off, and so during that time, everybody was when I say everyone, loosely, everyone was at home. So if the postie arrived and the box didn't fit in, the postie could hand it to them. Whereas people were starting to phase back to work or go back to their usual older routines and that type of thing. And so what that meant was I was getting people that I was getting sent to the depot. So then that becomes not a good customer experience. So all of the things that I thought around making that a pack size of 30 just seemed like a really logical decision when it was on a business plan before I started. But then the reality of like listening to your customer feedback and looking at your margins and all the other things that I described, that's what helped make the change to the pivot. So I'm not going to give you numbers of revenue, but if I show you on a graph, it's a lot more appealing graph from the moment we changed the pack size to the year before when we'd had the previous pack size. It was like all the things on the graph were going in the right direction after 3 months of the new pack size, and that's a good thing. So yeah.
And that's brilliant, because a conundrum that founders often have is that the smaller packages are lower barrier to entry because they're cheaper, that feels like less of a commitment, but they don't necessarily show the results. And so there's that balance of what do we need to get people to do so that they see why and latch on and keep using this product because they see the results, versus what feels like a an appropriate level of spend to test something and to try something they haven't done before. How did you, was that from a scientific point of view that you knew how long it would take, or is that reviews that you read?
So there's a few things. So like our hero ingredient, if you want to call it that, so that was all studied on lots of people, but one of the like best, the sort of like highlight paper that was done was on 28 days, or sorry, I might be telling a fib there, either 28 days or 30 days. There was something that was driving the rough 4-week and so that study was the thing that was driving initially the 30-day pack. I think they called it a month rather than days. That's what's getting me confused there. And so that was really what was driving it. And also in my mind as a consumer, I'm like, oh, well, 30 days, that's fine. Of course, I would just buy it in 30 days. And that's what, and definitely our highest seller now is people buying in 28-day packs. But I think when you start from zero, you've got no brand awareness, nobody knows who you are, they've not necessarily seen your brand anywhere that's recognizable, and then they're getting fed either Facebook ads or some of the other channels, is like 30 just seemed like too big of a jump. I mean, I'm hearing that anecdotally. I you know, it wasn't something that we were necessarily testing, but I can instantly see now that when we changed the pack size in September 1st of last year, just completely different world, much easier. But also we do then have a year of people leaving reviews. So there's a lot of things at play. It wasn't just one thing, but yeah, big change.
And could you talk more around the pivot around being more commercially minded? Because it's something that a lot of founders feel, you know, they're following their passion, they're trying to solve a problem. They're not necessarily business, you know, they haven't necessarily gone and done an MBA and know exactly how to run a business and all the business models that you're supposed to follow. So how did that sort of transform for you?
Yeah. So I think for me, if anyone was to sit in front of me just now and talk about their business, I would be saying to them, you need to be more commercially minded. You know, it's very easy when it's not your business and you don't care about your customers maybe in the same way. Like, I really care about good outcomes for my customers. So any story around IBS, I'd be like, here, have a discount, have it free, have it cheap. I gave a lot of product away for no real commercial value during the first year of the business. And one, that was a big learning curve, but two, I think, like, you know, it's because the driver, like I said at the start, my purpose, my role was to help people and is to help people with IBS and other digestive health issues. And so it's really difficult to then hear their stories, especially like on our chat function on social media, etc. And, you know, any reason why they might not be able to afford a premium product, I'd be like, okay, take it. And so some would come back, of course, like I have the data to prove that, but realistically, I was giving away a lot of product for not really much benefit to the business. And actually, that doesn't help serve my overall purpose of helping more people, because and then don't have enough product and we sold out. And then also it just means that commercially it wasn't making sense the first year in the business to keep giving so much away. So there was a few things around commercial mindedness as well. Is like, I think I'm still struggling with this at times, is being really clear on what the product does on the website. I have this sort of thing of like, oh, well, we'll just casually mention what it is and casually tell you to buy it. Whereas actually I need to be more obvious on the benefits, how it helps improves people's lives, and also like how to easily purchase. So I think I made some confusing things around our subscription, so that you had to subscribe to buy more, and then that was maybe potentially putting people off. So there's definitely some pieces around the testing of how to make the product as clear and easy to understand, because we're all really busy, and you know, if you don't stop the scroll and if you don't grab the attention and make the purchase promptly, then that obviously makes it much harder to re-engage people. So some of the commercial minded things is around better copywriting on the site, more clear around what the product actually does. And in case that hasn't been clear on this session, it helps improve bloating, inflammation, and bowel regularity. And also to just be really clear on how it's not just for people with IBS. So we've got content that's made by our customers, where they are talking about the benefits of the product to them. So I actually asked one customer about a year and a half ago, would she mind doing a quick video of her experience? Then she sent me a 15-minute video of, I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. So now like chop that down into like more usable content, because most people aren't going to sit and watch that 15 minutes. But what that also then gave me was that benefit of like, no, this really is working. Because one of the things with e-com, you see that people are still buying, you see that people are engaging, they're leaving reviews, but for someone to take 15 minutes of their time to talk about your product, like, I mean, it literally did bring a tear to my eye of like how, like, I've done that, you know, like what would that customer be doing if I hadn't done that? But you then I always have to balance all of that out, is like commercially the business needs to make sense. And so one of the next stages in the business is definitely, and it's not a pivot, it's an addition, but we'll be pivoting into, I've just said it's not a pivot and then I've said it's a pivot, but we'll be pivoting into a range of other products. And so that's like the next phase for the business, so that we can really help more people, because that is the goal.
Talked a lot about getting feedback and how that's driven what you're doing and how you've made these changes. So could you give a little bit of insight into the type of customer feedback that you get and what's been really useful for you?
Yeah, so I've done quite a few things. So one, we've got the reviews. That's an automated system. It's by an app called Looks on our website. And what that does is it captures reviews. So all, you know, people can free form respond there. When I make it really clear in a lot of our emails, especially early stage in the flow, is if a customer wants to ask a question, the email will come to me directly. I don't know how that's going to work moving as we scale the business. But what I then do is get a lot of rich information around questions around like, how do I take it? I've seen some people add it to this, you know, like I can then quickly nip things in a bud, and just in terms of being able to quickly answer the questions. So like you take it straight from the sachet, or you can mix with water. But even just having that, it means that I can then add that information into our email flows and so on, and our social media. So we make it really clear that people can feedback through every channel going. So we've got a chat function on the website. We have our Looks reviews. They can email us anytime, of course. They can also message us on social media. We've also done surveys here and there. So I think like what we're doing is, through all of that process, is I'm just trying to gather as much information that can help make sure that what we're delivering is what we think we're delivering. And every time I get a bit of feedback, even if it's good, bad, otherwise, we don't always like respond to it, but it's always noted and something is done with it. So that's kind of how we use all of that feedback essentially.
And pulling that all together, what advice, if somebody came to you now and said, I want to start an e-com brand, this is what I'm really passionate about, what would be your like top advice for them?
So there's a few things. So one, I would be really clear on them understanding like their margins. That's something that like I still like, so I know my margins, but I often then still occasionally do like promotions that don't necessarily make sense, like to the bottom line. That's silly of me. I would definitely do that. I would be also encourage them to engage with like some of the accelerator programs that exist. So I joined those probably a year and maybe like 14 months into trading. So there's accelerator programs from most of the big banks. But there's also like local accelerator programs depending on your industry. So I don't know necessarily about e-com, but what I'd be doing is speaking to as many e-com people as possible. And don't be scared, because I'm in a group now of around 30 brands, maybe more than that, done by someone called Jonathan Lundy. He set it up because he works with a lot of brands. And so we all now ask each other questions, loads of questions. So it'll be like, hey guys, has anyone done this? Or like, does anyone have this little bit of help on Shopify? Or does anyone have a contact at Waitrose? Or like anything like that. And we all help each other out. And it's a really, really helpful way that nobody's competing with each other. No one's trying to outdo each other. We're all just genuinely want to help each other. And I don't think there's been a question asked in that group that hasn't been answered by someone else, because everybody's all at different stages in their business. There's some big brands in there. There's some tiny brands. Like I still count myself as a tiny brand. Okay, maybe I'm small. I keep calling it the toddler. So it was a baby in the first year, and now it's the toddler. So it's toddling. It's starting to learn how to walk on its own. So yeah, I would just encourage you to like, don't be sitting in your room on your own building your ecom brand. Is connect with other ecom owners, even if they're just 6 months ahead of you, because you'll be able to learn from them.
That's good advice. And where should people follow you? Where do you find out more?
So if you want to follow me, I'm Gemma Stuart. I'm on LinkedIn. So I think my LinkedIn is linkedin.com/Gemma Stuart. So the spelling's there. And also you can get Gut Wealth on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and we're sort of on TikTok. We're still dabbling with that. But yeah, you can just find us by searching Gut Wealth, and that's with a W.
Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Lovely. Talk to you soon. Bye.